Our highlight of the week is to talk to the wonderful Megyn Kelly, host of The Megyn Kelly Show. Find it on YouTube. Find it, of course, podcast, SiriusXM if you're in the US. Or you can see her here each and every Wednesday on Paul Murray Live. Megyn, lovely to see you. Who knew that what's been happening in the Middle East could get worse? But it always gets worse. You're on the air today when the first reports started to come through that a hospital had been bombed. The Hamas says that it was an Israeli strike, one of the many thousands that have made it there. Israel says no. It was one of the 30% of the rockets that they tried to fire from Gaza into Israel that ended up blowing up the hospital. Look, who is responsible is the story, but the reality is that hundreds of people are now dead.
This is a nightmare. It seems very clear that this was a Hamas rocket. Israel doesn't target hospitals. It doesn't target hospitals. Hamas intentionally puts its headquarters underneath hospitals. And according to the laws of war, you could, FYI, you could still hit the hospital depending on just how many Hamas terrorists you would take out and just how many civilians you would take out. I'm sorry to put it so blatantly, but that is, according to the rules of war, how you do these calculations. Having said that, Israel doesn't do that. They don't do that. But Hamas does misfire rockets all the time. And frankly, Paul, they're not beyond doing it intentionally for the propaganda value and to gin up support against Israel. They're evil. These are devils. Somebody who would murder the children the way they have, tie their hands behind their back, and then shoot them in the head, tie their hands behind the back, and then burn them alive. They're capable of anything. All right. So that's where we have to start from. But the media and the Palestinian Arab world has run with these initial propaganda releases from Hamas that Israel bombed a hospital. Politico, mainstream publication over here, Israel bombed a hospital. I mean, you know that this is what they're going to do. You know that there's at least a 50-50 chance the initial reporting on this kind of thing is going to be wrong. Hold your fire. Be careful as a media person. And even speaking to you right now, I understand that it could change. But from the second we got these news reports, it was very clear you needed to be careful. Hamas often puts out disinformation, misinformation, always to make Israel look bad. And they're constantly misfiring rockets at their own people. So now what we have is embassies getting stormed, the Middle East on fire, Middle Eastern countries canceling their meetings with President Biden, who's on his way to the Middle East, at least as of now, and going into a firestorm at the moment because of this. And it leads me back to my second point, which was, is there any chance this was intentional? Is there any chance, is there any chance they did it because they wanted this result of more fire, more anger, more destruction, and more targeting of Israelis?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you about the evil of Hamas in any way, shape or form. The reality, of course, as well, is that, again, Israel says it's absolutely not the case, but when you've dropped 6,000 bombs, obviously that can be done with absolute precision. Whether one goes into the wrong place or not, we have to get a third party here to tell us what's going on. My supposition is very much with you about the evils of Hamas, but it'll be interesting to see what Biden says about it when he actually turns up, because, you know, let's be honest here, is that, you know, he's going to want to try to go in there to achieve two things. One, he wants to show absolute support for Israel. But two, he has openly said that he wants the innocent people in Gaza to be able to still have food, still have water, still have petrol, because, of course, they aren't Hamas. I never trust Joe Biden, but I tell you what, at a time like this, I'm frightened that it's Joe Biden in the room. What do you think?
I know. Me too. All we've done is project weakness since he took over inside the Oval. That's all we've done. And weakness has proven extremely provocative and dangerous, not just for the United States, but for her allies. You know, what happened in the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan continues to reverberate with lives lost, I believe. I don't believe we would have had a Russian invasion of Ukraine without that disastrous moment in Afghanistan. And I also question whether Hamas would have felt emboldened to do what it just did with America if we had a strong America and a strong president who knew how to lead, or at least in Trump's case, who was erratic enough that they were afraid of him. I'm not saying Trump was some foreign policy genius, but he was erratic enough that he was scary. Germany's Angela Merkel said to our ambassador, "Your guy scares me. I don't know what he's going to do next." And Rick Grinnell tells the story of how he smiled, saying he tried to stop his smile because he was like, "Great, that's exactly what we want." But we want it, yes, from our allies, but even more so from our enemies. And I think, unfortunately, what people know now is exactly what we're going to do, which is probably not much. Even in Ukraine, the criticisms over here go at Joe Biden because if you're going to get in, you can't be a little bit pregnant. Either go in and give them what they need to defeat Russia, or don't go in. But we're trying to have it both ways, where we're running out of our own ammo, we're depleting our own sources, we're spending billions of dollars, we're fighting a proxy war now with a nuclear power, Russia, and we have no clear strategic objectives. Nothing that's obviously achievable. What, like just go back, give it all up, Russia, give it all up? That's okay. That's not happening. Russia's not losing, so it's really not happening. And now the same thing is happening in Israel, where I just don't know whether Joe Biden has any sort of military might behind his threats that he's actually willing to unleash. And I certainly don't think the American public is in the mood for that.
Well, this is it. I mean, remember the two most recent forays into the area, they were multi-billion dollars, many thousands lost, and 20-year wars. Pretty obvious that would be exactly the same thing on the cards, even worse, if we're talking about places like Iran. And remember, Iran, as late as yesterday, was saying they could be preemptive in their strike here. So, again, him in the room just frightens me. And the thing about Trump was, again, if they know what your response is going to be, then they start to factor that in about how far they can push you. If they don't know what your response is going to be, they don't push you, which in part is, yes, part of the Trump foreign policy, which I know concerns everyone on MSNBC. But guess what? The world was a safer place for those 4 years, and the Middle East was getting a whole bunch of peace deals in place rather than the wars that have been breaking out. And just on Trump, one without notice. Yesterday, he said he'd be willing to go to jail to save the country. Now, I thought this was an ad-libbed remark, but I went back and I watched. No, he read it off the teleprompter. Now, either he'd be surprised somebody wrote that in a speech or he meant to say it. He's also got his gag order from one of the judges. He's leading with his chin now, isn't he?
If he goes to jail, it's not to save the country. If he goes to jail, it's because the Democrats are trying to destroy the country.
Correct.
Trump going to jail doesn't save anything. It will be an absolute travesty. He doesn't belong in jail. This is a joke. And it's not noble of him to go to jail. It's a travesty. It's deeply wrong and immoral. He doesn't belong in jail. Everyone knows that. It's not, he can't reframe it because he is likely to be convicted as like a service to the nation. That's not what's happening. But it doesn't make the prosecution of him any more right. It's deeply wrong. It should stop right now, especially because we need a very full, fair, robust contest for this White House now more than ever. They always say, the Democrats always say, this is the most important election of my lifetime. And really, it's because, you happen to have a black man running for president, right? The most important, because we've got to get this particular man in so I can feel good about myself. This actually might be. America is in a state of decline. Our position as leader of the free world is in a state of decline, but it doesn't have to remain this way. We have $33 trillion in debt that we can't pay, and we have no plan to pay. We've got entitlements through we've got an economic crisis that we're in the midst of, and one that's laying right on the horizon. And we don't have time for people who are incompetent, weak, and can't put two sentences or steps together. So we really need a full and fair contest, and we cannot have the leading candidate for the Republican nomination tied up for the entire year in court or, God forbid, in jail. And that's the thing that you forget about when Trump says election interference. It's not just that they're trying to put him in jail and make him such that he can't be president. It's a full year leading up to the contest of him completely distracted with 4 major criminal trials that will be stressful for the man. That really will be stressful. So it's already working. He's already being pulled in all these different directions. And meanwhile, these other Republicans can't get any oxygen. And one of them may actually have to serve, Paul. One of them actually might have to serve. What if Trump does go to jail over the next year? It could happen. This Judge Chutkan in D.C., who just shut him up, she's full steam ahead, March trial. It's happening. She hates him. She's the most likely to try to get him in jail if he gets, probably when he gets convicted, though that case could wind up being decided by an appellate court. What if he does go? And what if Joe Biden dies? I'm sorry, God forbid, but he could die. He's very old and infirm. And now you've got Kamala Harris, who literally nobody wants as president. And who on the GOP side? Some people say, oh, well, Trump could, most jails, they assume that the justice system would let him leave and postpone his jail sentence so that he could serve as, what? Where's the precedent for that? We're in uncharted territory, and the GOP actually does need a very strong bench and needs to pay attention to who's coming up behind Trump, even if it's 40 points behind him. And the Democrats need to think long and hard about whether they're going to stick with this incapable, infirm ticket.